Hi, Crazy Cujo here. Today I want to show you how I teach a move called turtles. Before we start doing turtles, we have to warm up the wrists, prepare them, develop them, strengthen them, and so on. That allows us to get through moves like this with fewer injuries. So, hands and knees. Hands shoulder width apart, arm straight up and down. And I'm going to start making circles with my elbows. And I'm acting like I'm pushing the floor away. And as I do this, my arms are getting longer. I'm pushing my back up towards the ceiling, trying to make my arms longer and putting weight on my hands as I do this. Do that a few times, and then the elbows circle the other way. And as I'm doing this, I can take my knees off the floor and repeat the movement, but now it's more challenging. And still making sure I push away from the floor. And what that does is it warms up my wrists, yes, but it also gets me into the habit of protracting my scapulae. I'm pushing my shoulder blades forward to make my arms longer, which is a critical component of a lot of the work that we do when we're doing turtles and similar movements. Now I'm going to warm up the other side of my wrist. And I'm going to do that in a circular fashion. So it's going to look like I'm doing this, but with weight on my hands. So if I do one hand at a time, I'm going to roll the hand over like so, and then push away, and then reverse, push away again to the palm. On the other hand, like that, and then both. And the whole time, I'm thinking about lengthening my arms, pushing away from the floor. Another angle. And again, we can pick up the knees off the floor, make it a little more challenging, get you a little stronger, a little more warmed up. Ow, that was hard. Now this one I call palm push-ups. I'm just gonna push my palms off the floor, the heel of my palm specifically. The knuckles here will stay connected to the floor. And I've got some of my body weight distributed onto my hands, but not all of my body weight. So I'm still on my hands and knees, and I'm just lifting the heel of the palm and keeping the knuckles connected to the floor. I can do two hands at the same time, one hand at a time. But the point is not to make it too difficult, but just challenging enough to actually warm up the muscles so that they're prepared to do the work we want to do. So this is where we talk about leverage. For example, if I take away some of the load being my body weight, my upper body, by leaning back and having this backward angle of my arms, I make the movement a lot easier. As I go more vertical, it's a little harder. And as I move the angle in the opposite direction, more forwards, now it's much harder. And I typically don't want to start here. I want to work my way up to this position because It's so challenging due to the leverage that is not in my favor, making it harder, that if I'm not warm, I could actually injure this area. And I think that this is a big part of why a lot of people get sprained wrists and other wrist injuries, because they get into that sharp angle maybe too quickly or too unexpectedly. It catches them off guard. They're not prepared. They're not warmed up enough. Maybe the wrist isn't flexible enough, or maybe not strong enough in that extended position to tolerate that stress, and snap. Not good. So a variation of the palm push-up is to actually come up to the fingertips. Now with this one, you can't put as much of your weight on your fingertips, of course, unless you have extremely strong fingers, but it is a valid variation. Again, the point not being to make a trick out of it, to show off how strong your fingers are, unless you really want to, but the point is to warm up the wrists and the hands to prepare you to do the work we want to do. So this is perfectly fine with the arm ankle going back at first, and then more vertical, and then more forward ankle, which again is quite a bit harder. Then you can do a reverse palm push-up that is modified. So now you're going from the backs of the wrists up to the knuckles, back of the knuckles, in this sort of fashion. And this is something you can't do in quite the same way with muscular effort. You might have to treat it by using more of your body parts, your lower body or even your full body. You can't just, with muscle, move your entire body weight from the back of the wrist to the knuckles. So you'll sometimes see people doing sort of a push-up variation on this, where they'll be here and then push up to that position. That's fine. Push-up is a whole other topic for warming up your body, strengthening your body for these types of movements. But that specific one requires the momentum from the explosive action at the bottom of the push-up getting to the top of the push-up in order to go from the wrist to the knuckles. But it's perfectly fine. There are plenty more things that we can do to warm up the wrists and the hands for this type of action, but it might be enough to start with those sorts of things, and some more obvious and intuitive things like just shaking your hands out this way and this way, as long as it doesn't hurt, as well as slowly rolling the hands out. Now in this one, I'm making an effort to flex all of my fingers, actually extend all of my fingers in kind of a wave pattern. And I can also do the same thing in a fist pattern. I don't know if the mic is picking up the crackling of my wrists. 32 years of this. Hurts a little. Now, the actual turtle position, the idea is that you are stabbing your elbow into your hip. Now, it's the bone of the hip. This is sometimes called the as-is in anatomy, ASIS, anterior, superior, iliac spine. And then it's just the bone of the elbow, more or less where your funny bone is, that touches that part of each hip. Now, if you do one side at a time with the other arm offset, then it's a baby freeze. And you should be able to do a baby freeze in order to do a turtle freeze, typically. For most people, a baby freeze is easier, usually on their dominant side. I'm right-handed. Some people will have an easier time doing both hands for better balance and stability. Other people will have a harder time doing both hands, stabbing both hands into the hips at the same time because of anatomical differences. Some people simply cannot get their elbows here. And I've never quite figured out exactly why, but I know a number of people that simply cannot do a turtle. And that's fine, because there's a lot of other stuff that you can do with this information and to turn it into other movements, other variations, to take it in other directions, which we'll see later. The baby freeze position is just that. Typically, dominant arm stabbed into the hip, side of the head on the floor, opposite knee on opposite elbow, feet up in the air, double stag position, both legs bent. When we do a turtle, we're keeping a lot of the same rules and positions of the body. It's just that instead of one arm offset, you've got the elbow now into the same or opposite hip. I will often teach both baby freezes and turtle position from a push-up position first, or a plank position. And the reason for that is because it can be very counterintuitive for newcomers who don't have an obvious and immediate talent for breaking to figure out how to get into these positions exactly. And often there's a lot of falling and rapid injuries almost immediately, where people fall on their head, fall on their face, hyperextend their wrist, sprain a finger. It can be pretty awful. So when I've taught quite a few beginner populations, very young, very old, etc., I've come up with this way of doing things, doing this thing that is almost injury proof, almost foolproof. You can still mess it up. But the idea will be, if I'm in a push-up position, and I'll show this at different angles, I'm going to actually open the legs a little bit so I'm more stable and more balanced. I'm going to put one hand where I think I'm going to drop my hip to, and then lower the hip to that elbow and push back up and bring it back to the push-up position. And then do the other one. Lower, and I'm bending both arms, push back up, and then push-up position again. Now, where to put this hand? I'm putting it just about under my belly button, the center of my body. So that way I can lower the hip right there. And then push back up, and other hand. Boom. Another ankle. And up, and opposite, down, and up. Straight on. Boom. Up, down, and up. And then, if I need to, depending on the student, I can add my head to that process, to the bottom position. So when I'm in my push-up position and I lower down, I touch the hip to the elbow and I gently place the upper side of the head onto the floor. And then head up, push up, hand back to the beginning, opposite side. Lower down to the elbow, touch the head, head up, push up, and back. Now, as we keep going through this process of baby steps, layering on one baby step on top of another, and occasionally going into a little tangent and then coming back, we will, for example, pick up 1 foot in this process. So if I'm in a push-up position, bring the hand to the center, drop down to the elbow, or up hip to the elbow, put the head down, then I can lift one leg. It doesn't matter how I lift it. I can also lift the other leg, and I should get comfortable doing both. Yes, I can also bring the knee to the elbow, and I've got a baby freeze, the beginning of one. But then I can repeat the same thing on the other side. And it's the same pattern. And I can start to play with that, and then try to pick up that other leg. So now I've got both hands on the floor. Well, I meant both legs off the floor. And I can get into a little bit of a rhythm with this and have a little bit of fun. Front ankle. Now we're going to shift from one side through the turtle position over to the other side and back through the turtle into the beginning. From the side, push-up position, stab position, lower, head, and then I'm going to rotate towards the top of my head and pick up the other hand, stab it, and rotate my body to the left, and then more to the left, and pick up the other hand. And then I can push up, right? And then now from the left side to the top of the head / forehead to the right. And I can offset that hand however I want, push up, and there we are. Again. And I can stay down. And then I can lift the hand, do something cool with it, put it out to the side, straight ahead, and then pick up a foot, shift, foot, shift, foot, and then maybe both feet. Not thinking about the shape I'm making, just lifting the legs. So what this does is it gets me really comfortable having the weight on my hands, my body weight on my hands, with my wrists gradually beginning to accept my body weight in that position. And then it gets my elbows comfortable supporting the weight of my hips, but really my whole body via my hips in these positions. And then I gradually, as I am able, begin to lift one leg at a time, maybe the other leg only, then one and both, and back down, and so on and so forth. I'm trying to make the smallest of baby steps that I need in order to begin to progress, so I don't feel like I'm stuck at one spot in the progression, in the development, and hitting a wall and not able to get past it. You get past it by spending more time there and getting more comfortable. And then there are more steps that we can add in. We can make even smaller baby steps between these baby steps as needed. There are two more points I want to make about the table or platform that I'm standing on as I get into these two positions, the baby freeze and the turtle, or the stab position and the turtle. One is going from the ground up, my hand. When I have my hands on the ground, my fingers are not passive. They're not just flat on the ground. They are actually in very active contact with the ground. They're almost squeezing the ground like an orange, or twisting off the lid of a jar of pickles. And what that looks like is, you can see my hand. This is a passive position. I'm just relaxing my fingers. But an active finger position looks more like that. I'm gripping the floor, and not like a cat or something like that. It's not extreme. I still need the pads of my 5 fingers in contact with the floor, but it looks something like that if you can see that position well enough. And both hands are doing this at the same time. And typically they are more active when more of my weight is shifted to one side. For example, if I have both hands on the floor, but more of my weight is on the right, my right fingers are more active than my left. But my left fingers are not passive unless they need to become passive. For example, shifting up all the way into a one-arm position, right? So the point about having active fingers when you're standing on your hands might be more like point 1A. So let's go to point 1B before we go to point 2. This would be along the lines of creating a broader platform on which to stand. when you're standing on your hand. And you do that by opening the fingers quite a bit as you're standing on each hand. More important for the hand that's taking more of the weight, of course, more of your weight. So the logic here is that as you spread out your hands, you create this broader platform, and you can analogize this to perhaps standing on a stool to change a light bulb. If the stool is very narrow, it's going to wobble and you're not going to feel very safe standing on that. If you have a broader stool or wider stool, then you're going to feel safer because the wider stool gives you more stability to stand on and balance on effectively. So it's the same logic to open the hands and have a wider base on which to stand. So now, point 2. This has to do with the angle of the forearm or forearms. If your forearm is vertical, you're going to be balanced fairly well depending on the relative lengths of your upper body and lower body. Its proportion is similar to balancing a scale. So in just a baby face, I'm pretty vertical because my legs are pretty short because I've got them bent in a double stack position, and they're about the same length as my upper body. So my arms are pretty vertical. Yeah? You can see it from the other side. Pretty vertical arms. Forearms. Now, as I change the length of my legs, I have to change the length of my upper body, which I can't do because my upper body already is the length that it is. I can slouch more or extend more, but that's about it. With my legs, I can make them half as long by bending them, and even shorter by also tucking them in. But as they get longer, which they will do for a turtle, the angle of my forearm has to change in order to artificially lengthen my upper body. So that looks like this. Vertical line, and then as I lengthen my legs, my head has to slide forwards to accommodate that additional length. You can see my head trying to slide forward even though my bald head doesn't want to do that. And then back. As my lower body shortens, then my head slides back because my upper body is shortening. Yeah. So from the other side, maybe without the head this time. What you can see there, if you look closely, is that my head has to reach further and further forward as my legs reach further and further backwards. And because I can't make my upper body longer, the angle of my forearm goes from vertical to this more open angle to accommodate that. There is stress associated with that. You need strength in the elbow joint, both the elbow itself, but also the what's called the antecubital area, the front of the elbow, and strength in the hand, specifically the radial part of the hand. So maybe these 3 fingers, middle finger, forefinger, and thumb, or at least these first 2 fingers, the forefinger and thumb, because so much of the weight is shifting from the whole hand to just those 2 or 3 fingers. And if you look carefully from the back angle, you can see that this part of the hand, the ulnar side of the hand, where the pinky and the ring finger are, it actually will come off the floor if I go far enough forwards. So now we have this drill. We have the preparation for the drill. We have some of the details that make the drill possible, that make the platform possible and more stable. Now, what do? How do we transition from the platform to the drill into turtles? It's gradual, baby steps, one at a time. So we've already done the push-up, drop down, place the head, lift the legs, for example, into a baby face. But we can also take the head away. So, for example, I'm here in my baby face. I can try to lift my head off the floor. very gradually. And that might at first become kind of a teeter-totter action. Lift the legs and the head just comes up. What you can do is you know that's coming. So if you can try to delay that falling down of the legs and try to increase what we'll call the hang time of the legs, staying up in the air, hovering until they hit the floor. And as you're doing that, you're getting more comfortable with that position, this new position where you're balancing on 2 points of contact instead of 3. The 2 hands versus the 2 hands plus the head, which would make the 3 points of contact. And if you go back a little bit, you can recall that we've got 5 points of contact at one point, right? In a push-up position, 4, of course. We shift, there's still 4. We put the head down, now there's 5 points of contact. We're very stable and very safe. Now, pick up one foot, we're back to 4. Pick up the other foot, we're back to 3. Try to pick up the head, we're at 2. And then here is where you got to really be proactive about those fingers. You might even be able to see it. My fingers are much more active than they were when I was just holding any of these positions, any of these prior positions. So now let's take that same push-up drill and take the head out of the equation. So here, hand comes in, down, foot. 1 foot at a time, right? Other side, 1 foot. Then other foot. See? And then both feet. Position doesn't matter, doesn't have to look like a cool freeze at first. Just get the feet off the floor and get comfortable holding that for a second. And then maybe try something. Baby freeze, baby freeze. Now, to really get this turtle position, let's again go baby freeze, turtle, baby freeze with the head on the ground, but let's try taking the feet away. So, push up, down, there, right? 1 foot at a time. And now, from the front. Now, from the side, same idea. From the push-up, stab, head, there. With the baby. Now, without the baby, see, both feet up, both feet down. Now, 1 foot and 1 foot. Now, let's try no feet. Up, 1 foot. 1 foot still up. Both feet up, down, and shift. So it's very gradual in that kind of way, if it needs to be. For some people, it will not need to be. For some people, it will absolutely need to be this gradual with this almost infinite number of baby steps. Now, the other thing we can do is take the head away, but put the feet back down, or at least 1 foot at a time. So here, there, pull the hand into a turtle, reach the other hand up, other foot up. Now that hand is optional. That hand doing an extra movement is optional. This is what we really want. And it's just a little rocking back and forth, getting everything comfortable and acclimated, and over time adapted to the position that you're trying to get your body, and more importantly your brain, to accept and to normalize. From the front, and up, up. And the real thing, just shifting from a stab on one side through the turtle, stab on the other, through the turtle again, and repeat. From the side. From the front. You'll notice that at first my legs were a little active, and then as I got more comfortable, less active and more still, more relaxed, kind of, tense, kind of. In reality, just tense enough, just relaxed enough that I can hold that position when I'm comfortable. In the beginning, you will not be comfortable. Your legs will move all over the place. The goal is over time to control the legs, minimize extraneous movements of the legs, because one is the lack of control, and two, it creates more stability by being able to control the legs. When you have more stability, you then control the rest of your body. You have more options into what you can do with the movement.